I never meant to become a prophet. That much was clear as the second hand of the city's great clock ticked down to 0 and nothing happened. The sky didn't crack open, the earth didn't swallow us whole, and the seas didn't boil away. Instead, the city square was filled with a silence so dense it seemed to absorb the very breath of the anxious crowd. I was there, of course. Corbin, the city's humble jester, dressed in my usual patchwork colors: red, blue, green, and yellow, as garish as a carnival tent. My painted smile was a stark contrast to the faces around me, etched with worry, exhaustion, and a strange kind of hope that clung stubbornly to the edges of their spirits. I danced and joked, not out of joy but necessity, trying to coax laughter from a crowd that had forgotten how to laugh. "And here we are," I said, my voice rising above the murmurs, "one day shy of doom, and the only thing falling is the price of bread." The crowd chuckled nervously, a sound that felt more like a wheeze than a laugh. The apocalypse had been scheduled for today, or so the clocks said. For as long as anyone could remember, the city lived in the shadow of an inevitable end, one that never quite arrived. The countdown was a grim ritual, a daily reminder that the world was always a day away from collapse. I had made a career of poking fun at the absurdity of it all. My jokes were the city's reluctant medicine, a way to dull the edge of despair. But today, something different happened. As I cracked a particularly irreverent joke about the cosmic forces, if the universe's scheduler had a sense of humor, I'd be out of a job. The clock struck 0 and silence. For a moment, the crowd froze, eyes wide, breaths held, hearts pounding in unison with the ticking seconds that refused to end. Then, slowly, disbelief gave way to a cautious hope. The apocalypse was postponed. The city was stunned. News spread like wildfire, carried on the whispers of incredulous voices. "Did you see? The end didn't come! It's delayed!" What did Corbin do? Backstage, I sat alone, the painted smile wiped off, staring at the empty streets beyond the curtains. The weight of the moment pressed on me, heavy and unfamiliar. Had I really triggered this delay? Was it fate, coincidence, or something else entirely? Mayor Griggs, the man tasked with keeping order in this crumbling metropolis, watched the unfolding chaos from his office, his face a mask of cynicism and worry. He muttered about maintaining peace, but I could see the flicker of something else: hope, maybe, or fear. That night, as the city held its breath, I realized that my joke had started something far bigger than me. The apocalypse was no longer a certainty but a question. And in that question lay a strange, fragile hope. The days to come would test us all, but for now the world had laughed back. And so had I. I stood at the edge of the square once more, the city's eyes upon me, waiting. The jester had become a prophet not by design, but by accident. And the cosmic joke was just beginning, so I said to the empty air, "Let's see how long this punchline lasts." The city was a labyrinth of contradictions, where the ordinary and the absurd danced hand in hand beneath a sky perpetually tinged with twilight. Corbin moved through the streets like a flicker of color against the gray monotony, his patchwork clothes catching the eye of wary passers-by. The air was thick with a peculiar kind of expectancy, not quite dread, not quite relief, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting. He paused at a bustling market square where vendors hawked their wares with nervous energy. A woman clutched a scrap of paper, eyes darting to a battered radio perched precariously on a wooden crate. The crackling voice announced yet another delay in the apocalypse countdown, the news spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Murmurs of disbelief mingled with tentative cheers, some faces lit with hope, others shadowed by skepticism. Corbin wove among the throng, exchanging nods and half-smiles. His painted grin was both a mask and a beacon, a reminder that laughter might still have a place in this strange limbo. A child tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Will it really not end today?" she asked. He crouched to meet her gaze, voice low but steady. "Sometimes the universe likes a good joke, and it's still laughing." The child's uncertain smile was a small victory. Later, Corbin found himself drawn to the city's fringes, where shadows gathered in corners and whispers carried secrets. It was here he met Luna, her sharp eyes scanning him with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant admiration. She was a woman forged by the city's endless delays, pragmatic, battle-worn, fiercely loyal to the fragile peace she had fought to build beneath the surface. "Your jokes," she said bluntly, "they stir the pot. People cling to them like lifelines, but they could just as easily snap and drag us all under." Her voice was steady, but her glance betrayed a flicker of fear. Corbin smiled, though his heart beat a little faster. Isn't that the point? To make them laugh before the end. Not when the end feels like it might never come, and the waiting is the real torment. You have to be careful, Corbin. Hope is a fragile thing. Their conversation stretched into the muted light of early evening, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the fading sun. Corbin listened as Luna spoke of factions rising and falling, of the delicate truce holding the populace from tearing itself apart. She warned him that his growing notoriety made him a symbol and a target. Later that night, Corbin perched on a graffiti-covered wall overlooking the city. The lights twinkled like stars caught in the net of human hope and desperation. He pondered the absurdity of their existence, a city caught in an endless limbo, always one step from oblivion, yet stubbornly refusing to fall. Was his role as jester enough to tip the scales? Could laughter truly stave off the creeping shadow of fate? The air was cool, carrying the distant hum of life that refused to be extinguished. Somewhere below, a street vendor's voice crackled over a radio, spreading the latest news of the postponed apocalypse. The city held its breath once more, balanced precariously between fear and hope, and Corbin felt the weight of the day settle upon him. Tomorrow would come, just as it always did, and with it, another chance to laugh at the end of the world. The city square was alive with an uneasy energy, a fragile mix of anticipation and disbelief. Corbin stepped onto the makeshift stage, his colorful patchwork clothes catching the dying rays of the sun, his painted smile a defiant beacon amidst the crowd's wary faces. The air was thick with the scent of damp cobblestones, and the faint tang of smoke from nearby chimneys, reminders of a world that stubbornly refused to end. He began with a light jab at the endless delays, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed survivors, and any cosmic entities eavesdropping if the apocalypse is fashionably late. Does that make it the universe's way of keeping us on our toes? A ripple of laughter broke through the anxious murmurs, tentative at first, then growing into genuine amusement. For a moment, the oppressive weight of impending doom lifted, replaced by the simple joy of shared humor. Among the crowd, eyes gleamed with hope and skepticism alike. Children clutched their parents' hands, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Elders smiled wistfully, memories of past false alarms flickering in their gaze. The city, trapped forever on the edge of oblivion, found a flicker of light in Corbin's irreverence. But not all were comforted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Was Corbin a prophet, a charlatan, or worse, a blasphemer tempting fate? Some saw in his jokes a sign of rebellion, a spark that might ignite the long-awaited end. Others clung to the hope he stirred, believing that laughter was the only rebellion left against an unyielding cosmos. As the crowd dispersed, a figure approached from the shadows. Ezekiel, the eccentric philosopher with wild white hair and eyes that held the depth of countless lost nights. His robes fluttered in the cool evening breeze as he stopped before Corbin, a knowing smile curling beneath his tangled beard. "You jest, and yet," Ezekiel said softly, "you wield a power older than prophecy itself. The cosmic joke is not merely on us, it is us. The universe chuckles at our attempts to find meaning, to bend fate with laughter. But perhaps in this absurdity there lies a kind of hope no doom can extinguish." Corbin regarded the sage, the weight of his accidental role pressing down with newfound gravity. "So, you, re-saying my jokes might mean something. That they might actually matter." Ezekiel's eyes twinkled with a mix of amusement and sorrow. "Indeed. But beware, jester. The greater the joke, the louder the cosmic machinery may roar in protest. Later, as twilight deepened and the city's noises quieted, Corbin sat alone atop a crumbling wall, his painted smile now a fragile mask. The laughter he provoked had become a double-edged sword, a beacon attracting not only hope but also scrutiny and fear. The city's gaze was upon him, a reluctant prophet in a liminal world. He thought of the faces he'd seen, hopeful, fearful, desperate, and realized that his role was no longer just to entertain but to embody a strange, absurd rebellion. In a world poised endlessly on the brink of destruction, perhaps the smallest joke could echo as loudly as any prophecy. The stars blinked awake overhead, indifferent yet somehow conspiratorial, as Corbin whispered to the night, "If the world must end, let it be with a laugh." And somewhere, in the vast machinery of fate, a cog turned uncertainly, as if pondering the jester's challenge. But this was only the beginning. The city watched, waited, and somewhere deep in the cosmic shadows, the forces of order stirred, wary of the jester who dared to laugh at the end of the world. The night held its breath, and Corbin prepared to face whatever absurdities lay ahead. Armed with nothing but his wit, and a stubborn hope that laughter might yet change the fate of all. The city never truly sleeps, not in the conventional sense. Its pulse is a slow, measured tick, like the steady beat of a clock counting down to a moment that never quite arrives. Corbin had wandered its streets many times, but today was different. Today, the usual cacophony of anxious whispers and hurried footsteps seemed to carry a heavier weight, as if the city itself held its breath. Luna led the way, her short-cropped dark hair catching the pale light of flickering street lamps, her practical clothes blending into the shadows of the alleyways. "The clocksmith's workshop is just ahead," she muttered, voice low but firm. "If anyone knows about the machinery behind this endless delay, it's him." Corbin adjusted the colorful patchwork of his clothes, the painted smile on his face a mask he wore like armor. He was out of his element here, no stage, no audience, just the heavy silence of secrets waiting to be uncovered. "So, this clocksmith," he said, trying to inject some levity, "does he fix broken clocks or just broken timelines?" Luna shot him a sharp glance, but a flicker of a smile betrayed her amusement. "You will see soon enough." The workshop was a cluttered sanctuary of mechanical wonders and oddities. Walls were lined with countless clocks, some traditional, others bizarre contraptions with whirring gears and glowing runes. The air was thick with the scent of oil and metal, punctuated by the soft tick-tock of countless ticking devices. Amidst this chaos stood the clocksmith himself, a figure hunched over a table strewn with tiny gears and wires. His grease-streaked face illuminated by the ghostly glow of a half-finished device. Goggles perched atop his tousled mop of hair, he looked every bit the mad scientist, lost in obsession. "You must be Corbin," he said without looking up, voice a low rumble edged with exhaustion and fervor. "And you must be Luna. I've heard whispers." The jester who laughs in the face of the end. Corbin offered a tentative smile. Accidental prophet if the rumors are true. The clocksmith finally looked up, eyes wild yet focused. "This city runs on a delicate balance, a machinery of fate, if you will. The apocalypse isn't just a day on the calendar. It's a mechanism, a clockwork event set in motion by forces beyond understanding." Luna folded her arms, skepticism clear in her stance. "And you think you can fix this machinery?" "I don't just think it," he replied, voice dropping to a whisper. "I have to. Because if it breaks, the consequences won't be limited to this city. The entire timeline could unravel." Corbin's gaze drifted to the array of devices around him. Each clock seemed to pulse with a life of its own, syncing and slipping out of rhythm in a haunting dance. Unable to resist, Corbin let slip a joke, his voice light. "Sounds like your machines have a sense of humor too, always running late, just like me." For a moment, silence hung thick. Then, an eerie tremor rippled through the workshop. Clocks faltered, their steady ticking stuttering and skipping as if hiccuping in time. The air grew tense, charged with something unseen but palpably dangerous. The clocksmith's eyes narrowed. "Did you feel that?" Luna's sharp gaze locked onto Corbin, who felt a pang of unease beneath his painted smile. "Your joke," she said. "It did something." Corbin swallowed hard, the absurdity of the moment striking him anew. Here he was, a fool tossing jests in a room where every word seemed to tug at the strings of fate itself. "The machinery is sensitive," the clocksmith explained, voice grim. "Every ripple, every disruption could cascade into chaos." Luna stepped forward, voice firm but cautious. "We need to understand the stakes before we push this any further. The city depends on it." Corbin nodded, the weight of his accidental role settling heavier on his shoulders. "Then let's figure out how to keep the clocks ticking without breaking the joke." As they prepared to delve deeper into the mysteries of fate and machinery, the city outside seemed to hold its breath once more. Somewhere beyond the ticking walls, the apocalypse waited, postponed but never forgotten. And beneath the layers of absurdity and hope, the question lingered: how long could laughter really delay the inevitable? The night stretched on, heavy with whispered secrets and fragile alliances. And somewhere, in the tangled gears of time, a jester's joke echoed, threading its way through the machinery of destiny, daring to rewrite the end. The day had settled into its usual rhythm of anxious anticipation, the city's people wandering through streets lined with cracked cobblestones and flickering lamplights, their faces etched with the lingering dread of a doom always promised but never delivered. Corbin stood center stage in the bustling square, his colorful patchwork clothes as vibrant as ever, his painted smile wide and inviting, his bright eyes scanning the wary crowd. He was the jester, the accidental prophet, the spark of laughter in a world teetering on the edge of despair. As he launched into his routine, tossing jokes like confetti into the air, the crowd's mood shifted subtly. Some chuckled, others smiled weakly, but most remained watchful, waiting for the day to end in the familiar calamity that never came. Corbin's humor was his weapon against the suffocating dread, a challenge to the cosmic clock that ticked ominously in the shadows. Then, suddenly, the world seemed to hold its breath. A cold wind swept through the square, carrying an unnatural chill that snuffed out the laughter and dimmed the lanterns. The murmurs hushed to silence as a figure materialized from the haze, a tall, imposing silhouette shrouded in shifting shadows, with eyes that gleamed like ticking clocks. Relentless and unforgiving, the harbinger had arrived. The crowd instinctively recoiled, whispers of fear and awe spreading like wildfire. Corbin's painted smile faltered for a moment, but was quickly replaced by a mischievous grin. Well, he said, his voice ringing clear and defiant, "if it isn't the cosmic party pooper himself, come to remind us that the joke's over." The harbinger's voice was like the grinding of gears, cold and unyielding. "Corbin," he intoned, "your antics have delayed the inevitable, disrupted the balance of the cosmos. The apocalypse is not a joke, nor a game to be toyed with. The machinery of fate groans under this strain. The universe demands order." Corbin took a step forward, his eyes alight with irreverence. "Order? You call this endless limbo order? A city stuck one day before the end of the world? Sounds more like a punchline to me." The harbinger's shadowy form flickered with impatience. "Your humor is a dangerous contagion. It spreads hope where none should exist, undermining the schedule ordained by the Cosmic Council. The delay must end, the countdown reset. And if I refuse?" Corbin challenged, his voice steady despite the weight of the threat. "Then chaos will unravel the fabric of existence. Your defiance will be met with consequences beyond your understanding." Corbin's grin widened. "Consequences? I've lived in this city long enough to know that sometimes the best way to face the end is with a laugh. Maybe it's the universe that needs to learn that." A tense silence stretched between them, charged with the collision of cosmic inevitability and human irreverence. The harbinger's eyes clocked steadily, ticking down the moments, but Corbin's laughter broke through the gloom like a beacon, stubborn and bright. As the shadowy figure receded into the night, leaving behind a city caught between dread and defiance, Corbin knew this was only the beginning. The battle for the world's fate had shifted into a surreal dance of wit and will, and he was ready to play his part jester, prophet, and rebel against the ticking clock of doom. The night deepened, the city's heartbeat pulsing with uncertain hope. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed a reminder that the end was always near, but so was the laughter that defied it. And Corbin, with his painted smile and quick tongue, was the spark that refused to be extinguished. Yet as the dawn crept closer, the question lingered in the air like a whispered challenge. How long could one man's humor hold back the relentless march of fate? The game was set, the players in motion, and the city waited laughing nervously, hoping against hope that the joke would never end. The city was a powder keg, and the sparks were flying faster than anyone could catch. In the streets, the air thrummed with voices, some raised in worship, others in fury, and many trembling somewhere in between. Corbin, perched atop the battered wooden crate that served as his stage, felt the weight of every gaze, every whispered prayer, and every bitter curse. His painted smile, once effortless and bright, now felt like a mask too heavy to bear. It had begun innocuously enough that morning. The usual crowd gathered in the central square, their faces drawn and tired from nights spent waiting for an end that never came. But today, there was something different in the air, a crack in the fragile veneer of unity that had held them together. To one side, a cluster of fervent followers chanted Corbin's name, their voices rising in hope and desperation. Their eyes shone bright, clinging to every joke and every gesture as if it were a lifeline. Yet just beyond them, a sharp-edged group called for an end to the limbo. Their voices were harsh, their faces lined with bitterness. They demanded the apocalypse come at last, tired of the endless postponement that had become the city's cruel joke. Their shouts sliced through the murmurs like knives, sowing discord where once there had been uneasy peace. Corbin's gaze flicked between the two groups, the laughter in his chest caught in a chokehold of doubt. Was his humor really enough? Could it stave off the growing fear and anger? The jester in him wanted to toss out a quip, to ease the tension with absurdity, but the prophet in him hesitated. Each joke now carried weight, each smile a fragile shield against despair. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corridors beneath the city, Luna stood like a sentinel. The underground room was thick with smoke and the scent of damp stone, but her piercing gaze cut through the haze as she listened to the heated exchange among faction leaders. Their voices were rough with frustration, edged with desperation and fear. Luna's tone was steady, her words measured but firm. "We cannot tear each other apart," she said, pacing slowly. "The city is fragile enough without us turning on ourselves. We need a plan, not a brawl." Her pragmatism was a balm, but the tension lingered. She knew the factions were a powder keg, and she was the only one holding the matches back. Luna had once been part of the bureaucratic machine, a cog in the endless delays, but disillusionment had driven her underground. Now she was the city's unlikely guardian, trying to maintain order amid chaos. Above them, Corbin found a rare moment of solitude on a rooftop as twilight blurred its deep purples and oranges across the sky. The city below was restless, shadows lengthening and mingling with the flickering streetlights. He sat cross-legged, the patchwork of his clothes a riot of color against the darkening world. For the first time in days, the painted smile faltered. The loneliness of his role pressed down on him. Self-doubt crept in like a silent fog, threatening to smother the spark of hope he had so carefully nurtured. What if the laughter was just a fragile illusion? What if the cosmic machinery was already turning, and his jokes were but a brief distraction? He closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the city wash over him, the distant shouts, the murmurs of prayer, the quiet footsteps of those who still dared to hope. Somewhere deep inside, a stubborn ember glowed. The absurdity of their plight was undeniable, yet in that absurdity lay a strange, defiant beauty. At City Hall, Mayor Griggs sat behind a battered oak desk, the weight of leadership etched into his wary eyes and furrowed brow. The council chamber buzzed with unease as politicians and officials argued over how to handle the growing unrest. Griggs was caught between conflicting pressures, the desire to exploit Corbin's influence to maintain order, and the fear that the jester's rising cult might bring chaos instead. "We must walk a tightrope," Griggs murmured to himself, rubbing his temples. "One misstep, and it all falls apart." His voice, when he finally spoke to the council, was a blend of cynicism and resolve. "This city is fragile. Our people are fracturing. We need to balance hope with control, or risk losing both." Outside, the factions continued to clash. Corbin's followers held their ground, their chants a beacon of light in the encroaching gloom. Those who demanded the apocalypse's arrival grew more vocal, their anger feeding off the city's uncertainty. Luna's efforts to broker peace were tireless, but the fractures deepened. In an alley behind the square, Luna convened a secret meeting with faction leaders. Her voice was low but commanding. "We cannot let fear dictate our fate. The city needs unity, even if temporary. We fight the cosmic forces together or we fall divided." Some nodded, others scowled, but beneath the surface, a fragile accord began to form. It was a shaky truce, held together by Luna's unyielding pragmatism and the faint hope that Corbin's laughter was more than just noise against the coming storm. Back on the rooftop, Corbin wiped the sweat from his brow as a cold wind stirred the loose threads of his patchwork clothes. The city's endless limbo was a cruel joke, a cosmic prank with no punchline. Yet, in the faces of his followers, in Luna's steady gaze, in the cautious hope of Mayor Griggs, he saw something worth fighting for. He took a deep breath, the night air crisp and biting. The painted smile returned, a little more genuine this time. "Let them come," he whispered to the darkness. "I'll keep laughing." But laughter alone might not be enough. The fractures in the city were widening, and the next days would test not just Corbin's wit, but the very survival of hope itself. As the chapter closed, the city held its breath, balanced precariously between despair and defiance, awaiting the next move in a game whose rules were written by fate, but played with the wild cards of human spirit and cosmic absurdity. The night wrapped around the city like a velvet shroud, pressing close and thick with the scent of damp stone and distant rain. Beneath the flickering, uneven glow of a faulty street lamp, Ezekiel sat cross-legged on the cracked cobblestones, his wild white hair a chaotic halo that caught the feeble light. His eyes twinkled with a strange, restless energy as he looked up at Corbin, who perched awkwardly on a broken bench. His patchwork clothes a riot of muted colors in the gloom. "You see," Ezekiel began, voice low and deliberate, "the joke isn't just the joke. It's the echo, the ripple it sends through the cosmic pond. Fate, destiny, the apocalypse, they real machinery, cold, precise, relentless. But humor is a wrench thrown into the gears." Corbin blinked, the painted smile on his face feeling heavier tonight. "So, you re-saying my jokes, they matter. More than just a moment's laughter." "Exactly," Ezekiel replied, a slow smile breaking through his weathered face. "They rebellion. Each laugh is a spark, against inevitability, against despair." They sat in silence, the city's muted hum pressing in from all sides. Somewhere above, a clock chimed soft, off-beat, as if unsure of its own timing. "But isn't it all pointless?" Corbin asked, staring at the cracked pavement. "The end keeps coming closer, even if it delays." Ezekiel shook his head with a gentle chuckle. But that's the cosmic joke, isn't it? The end never quite arrives. It's stuck in limbo just like us, and that's why laughter is so vital. It's not the absence of fear, but its companion, the defiant grin in the face of the void. Over the next few hours, Ezekiel unraveled stories of cosmic absurdity, of bureaucratic deities trapped in their own regulations, of timelines bending and twisting like the spirals of a poorly tuned clock. Corbin listened, absorbing each word like a sponge, the weight of his accidental prophecy settling deeper into his bones. They moved together to an abandoned cafe, its windows grimy and cracked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. As they sipped bitter, scalding tea from chipped cups, The distant murmur of anxious city voices drifted through the broken glass. "People need hope," Corbin murmured, "but maybe my jokes aren't just hope. Maybe they're a kind of truth, a way to look the inevitable in the eye and wink." Ezekiel nodded, eyes gleaming. A wink can be more powerful than a shout. Outside, the city held its breath, caught in the fragile pause between dread and anticipation. Corbin stepped out into the silent street, the painted smile on his face catching the dim light. Without thinking, he let out a laugh, sharp, sudden, and utterly human. The sound echoed down the empty avenues, bouncing off crumbling walls, weaving through shadows. It was a laugh that said, "Not yet. Not like this." It was a laugh that said, "We are still here." Hours later, perched atop a crumbling statue of some forgotten hero, Corbin gazed out at the city. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, pale and uncertain. The apocalypse, once expected like a storm, had failed to arrive yet again. His painted smile felt less like a mask and more like a banner, a symbol, a declaration. He was no longer just a jester telling jokes for coin. He was a prophet of absurdity, a rebel against the cold machinery of fate. And tomorrow he would laugh again. Because sometimes the greatest act of hope is simply to refuse to be broken by the end. The city stirred below, caught in its endless limbo, but within Corbin burned a new fire, one sparked by laughter, fed by absurdity, and fueled by a hope that no apocalypse could silence. The workshop was a chaotic symphony of ticking clocks, whirring gears, and the faint hiss of steam venting into the stale air. Corbin stepped inside cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath his patchwork boots, while Luna's sharp eyes scanned the crowded room with suspicion. The scent of oil and burnt metal filled their nostrils, mingling with the faint aroma of old paper strewn haphazardly across workbenches. Towering shelves bowed under the weight of clock parts, blueprints, and tools that looked as ancient as the city itself. "Welcome to my sanctuary," murmured a voice from the shadows. The clocksmith emerged, a gaunt man with wire-rimmed spectacles slipping down his nose, his hands perpetually smudged with oil and ink. His overalls bore the scars of countless repairs, and his eyes flickered with a manic light that made Corbin uneasy. "Corbin, Luna," he said, nodding gravely. "I suppose you've come to see why the countdown refuses to end." Luna crossed her arms, her piercing gaze unwavering. "We've heard rumors. You're obsessed with fixing the timeline. But what exactly does that mean?" The clocksmith's fingers danced nervously over a dusty control panel cluttered with blinking lights and levers. "The apocalypse is on a schedule, a cosmic clockwork mechanism. Something's jammed it, a glitch in the machinery that keeps the end at bay. I've been trying to repair it, to reset the countdown, to restore order." Corbin's painted smile faltered. "You mean you want to force the end?" "No," the clocksmith protested, his voice cracking with desperation. "I want to restart the countdown properly. The delay is unstable, dangerous. It threatens the whole cosmic balance. If I don't act, the city, perhaps the world, could unravel in chaos." Luna's brow furrowed. "And what happens if you succeed?" He hesitated, then whispered, "The apocalypse will come, but on schedule, predictable, necessary." Corbin shook his head, the absurdity of it all crashing down on him. "But what about hope? What about the people who cling to these extra moments?" The clocksmith looked away, ashamed yet resolute. "Hope is a luxury in a broken clockwork world, ideal in time, not dreams." They moved closer to a complex device glowing faintly in the corner, a labyrinth of gears and circuits, the heart of the apocalypse countdown. Luna reached out tentatively, her fingers trembling. "This is what you want to reset?" The clocksmith nodded. "It's the only way." Corbin felt a chill. The joke he had thrown at the cosmic forces was now threatened by a man desperate to restore order, no matter the cost. "We can't let you do this," Luna said firmly. "The city depends on this limbo, on the hope that maybe, just maybe, the end can be delayed." The clocksmith's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Then you leave me no choice." Tension crackled in the air like static electricity as the three stood among the ticking machines, the fate of the city balanced on a knife's edge. Corbin swallowed his doubts, realizing the stakes were higher than he had imagined. The cosmic joke was no longer just his to tell, it had become a battle for the very survival of their world. "We need a plan," Corbin said quietly, turning to Luna. "We have to stop him before he triggers the reset." Luna nodded, her practical mind already racing through possibilities. "And we all need help. This isn't just about jokes anymore. It's war against the clock itself." Outside, the city hummed with restless anticipation, unaware that beneath its surface, a new and far more dangerous game was beginning. The countdown might have been stalled, but time was running out faster than anyone knew. Corbin glanced once more at the glowing device, a symbol of chaos and order intertwined. In that moment, he understood that laughter alone might not be enough. Sometimes the absurdity of fate demanded courage, cunning, and an unbreakable will to fight for the hope that danced just beyond the edge of the apocalypse. The clock was ticking, and the joke was far from over. The city was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, as if the usual hum of anxious anticipation had been temporarily silenced by the weight of what was to come. Corbin found himself perched atop the cracked stone of the old fountain in the city square, the very place where, only days ago, he had drawn laughter from a crowd teetering between despair and hope. The painted smile on his face felt heavier now, less a mask and more a fragile shield against the gnawing uncertainty within. As the sun dipped below the horizon, washing the sky in bruises of purple and orange, Corbin's thoughts churned like storm clouds. His jokes, once carefree sparks of irreverence, now carried the burden of cosmic defiance. Each punchline was a small rebellion against the machinery of fate. But the cost was clear. The laughter of the city was no longer simple amusement, it was a fragile thread holding back the abyss. Behind him, the distant murmur of the city's factions, the worshippers, the fearful, the desperate, echoed faintly through the empty streets. The weight of expectation pressed down on Corbin's shoulders, heavier than any jester's costume. He had become a symbol, a reluctant prophet in a city suspended on the edge of oblivion. His footsteps echoed as he descended from the fountain's crumbling edge and made his way to a concealed entrance beneath a rusted iron gate. The underground chamber was dimly lit by flickering lanterns, casting long shadows on the cracked plaster walls. Luna waited him, her piercing gaze steady and unyielding as always. "Corbin," she began, her voice low but firm, "the city needs more than your jokes now. They need strategy. They need a plan that doesn't rely on hope alone. Hope is fragile, and right now it's all we have. But it's not enough." Corbin met her eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle between them like a stone. "I know," he replied quietly. "But how do you turn laughter into a shield against the inevitable?" Luna's expression softened just a fraction. "By being more than a jester. By being a leader who understands the stakes." Their conversation was interrupted as a faint noise filtered through the walls, the soft shuffle of feet and hushed voices. Members of the city's factions, scattered and wary, preparing for the uncertainty ahead. The city was fragile, and the looming apocalypse was no longer a distant threat, but an imminent reality that demanded more than laughter. The following day, Corbin found himself before a gathering of hopeful citizens beneath the sprawling arches of the central plaza. The usual buoyancy of his performance was tempered by the somber faces before him. He opened his mouth to speak, to jest, but the words felt hollow. The laughter he drew was hesitant, uncertain, fractured by fear. After the gathering dispersed, Luna approached him. "See," she said softly, "you can't carry this alone." Corbin nodded, the truth settling like dust in his chest. He was no longer just a jester. He was a beacon, a symbol of resistance against the cosmic machinery that sought to end their world. But to sustain that light, he would need to blend his humor with pragmatism, his irreverence with resolve. That night, beneath the cold gaze of a moon that seemed to watch and wait, Corbin and Luna walked the empty streets. The city's silence was thick with unspoken fears and fragile hopes. Their footsteps echoed in the stillness, a steady rhythm against the backdrop of uncertainty. "We stand on the edge," Luna said quietly, "but we don't have to fall, not if we face it together." Corbin smiled, the painted grin now genuine. "Then let's make them laugh until the end." And with that, the jester prophet embraced the weight of prophecy, ready to lead the city through the absurdity and hope that defined their existence. As dawn approached, the city held its breath, suspended once more in the limbo between end and tomorrow. The joke was no longer just Corbin's, it was the city's, humanity's, a cosmic rebellion echoing against the fading stars. But the question remained, how long could laughter hold back the end? And would the joke be enough when the final curtain fell? The mayoral office was a cavern of muted light and stale air, the kind of place where decisions were made under the weight of desperation rather than hope. Mayor Griggs sat behind his scarred oak desk, fingers drumming a restless rhythm against the wood. Outside, the city murmured, a fragile pulse beneath the ever-hovering shadow of doom that had yet to arrive. Griggs rubbed his temples, the lines on his face deepening, as he stared at the latest reports, the crowds gathering in the square, chanting the name of the jester-turned-prophet Corbin. The man was a walking contradiction, a patchwork of color and laughter amid a gray world clinging to grim survival. Griggs didn't know whether to admire or fear him. "So," said a voice from the doorway, sharp and measured. Luna stepped inside, her piercing gaze cutting through the fog of Griggs' thoughts. "You're going to use him, aren't you?" Griggs sighed, pushing back his chair to stand. "Use him?" "No, Luna, I'm trying to save this city. Corbin is the only thing holding the people together. Their hope, fragile as it is, flickers because of him. And what happens when that hope turns into a riot? When the factions decide his words mean more than your orders, then I make sure it doesn't get that far." In the square, Corbin was already at work. His voice, warm and irreverent, floated through the air, weaving jokes and jabs that cut through the anxiety like a blade made of sunlight. The crowd reacted, laughter bubbling up like a rare spring amid the cracks of fear. Children clung to their parents. Elders smiled reluctantly, eyes wet with remembered joy. Corbin's painted smile was genuine tonight, but beneath it, a storm churned. The weight of expectation was heavier than any prop he had ever balanced on his head. Power was a strange thing for a jester, intoxicating, dangerous, slippery. That evening, an invitation arrived, a request from the mayor himself for a private meeting. Corbin hesitated but accepted, knowing the city's fate might hinge on what transpired in the shadowed rooms of power. In the mayor's office, the conversation was a dance of veiled threats and tentative alliances. Griggs laid out his vision, a partnership where Corbin's influence could be channeled to maintain order, to keep the city from unraveling into chaos. "I don't want to be a puppet," Corbin said, voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "No one's asking you to be a puppet," Griggs replied smoothly. "Just a partner." Luna's warning echoed in Corbin's mind. The line between hope and control was thinner than the painted smile on his face. Later, atop a rooftop overlooking the city's flickering lights, Corbin wrestled with this truth. The apocalypse was still a day away, perpetually postponed, but the real battle was here, in the hearts and minds of the people. Could he protect their laughter from becoming a tool of manipulation? Could hope survive politics? The city's breath held, waiting for the answer. And somewhere in the distance, the clock ticked on, indifferent to the gambits of men. The city was a living mosaic of unrest, each faction a shard of a fractured mirror reflecting desperation, hope, and fear in equal measure. As dawn crept over the horizon, the streets thrummed with a restless energy that had been building for weeks. Factions no longer whispered, but shouted their demands openly, their voices clashing like thunder rolling across a storm-darkened sky. Corbin stood on the rough-hewn wooden platform in the heart of the square, the patchwork of his jester's garb vibrant against the dull gray of the assembled crowd. Painted smile fixed firmly on his face, he scanned the sea of faces, some lit with curiosity, others twisted in distrust or outright hostility. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and the faint tang of smoke from nearby fires, a reminder of the city's simmering volatility. "Ladies and gentlemen," Corbin's voice rang out, clear and steady despite the tension clawing at his chest. Why did the cosmic chicken cross the apocalypse? To get to the punchline before the end. A ripple of reluctant laughter spread through the crowd, fragile and uncertain, but enough to pierce the heavy silence. Corbin's wit was his shield and his sword, each joke a small rebellion against the doom that hung over them all like a guillotine suspended by a fraying thread. Yet beneath the laughter lay the unspoken truth. Some wanted the apocalypse to come, to end the limbo, to put an end to the endless waiting and the gnawing dread. Others clung desperately to the hope Corbin embodied, laughing in the face of oblivion, because what else was there to do? Nearby, Luna moved through the crowd like a shadow with purpose. Her short-cropped dark hair caught the morning light as she approached groups, muttering heatedly among themselves. Her sharp tongue and piercing gaze cut through fear and suspicion as she brokered fragile ceasefires. "We hold together, or we fall apart," she warned them. "Violence only hastens the end no one wants." Her words were steel wrapped in velvet, a pragmatic plea born of years navigating the city's treacherous political undercurrents. She was the grounding force to Corbin's soaring idealism, the skeptic who kept his feet on the cracked pavement, even as his spirit danced among the stars. Meanwhile, tensions flared near a barricade hastily erected at the edge of the square. Faction members shouted slogans demanding the apocalypse proceed, their faces etched with desperation and fury. The clash of voices was punctuated by the sharp clang of a metal pipe striking an iron drum, a primitive war cry in a city caught between life and death. Corbin's laughter could not drown out the anger forever, and Luna knew it. She stepped between the factions, her voice firm but calm. "Enough. We share this city, this limbo. If we tear it apart, there will be nothing left to save." For a moment, the shouting ceased as eyes locked in grudging acknowledgement. But the fragile peace felt like a house of cards in a gale. In the mayor's office, high above the unrest, Mayor Griggs watched through broad windows smeared with dirt and rain. His lined face was drawn tight with exhaustion, the weight of endless postponements etched into every crease. He rubbed his temples, feeling the fragile threads of order slipping through his fingers. "Corbin's influence grows," he muttered to himself, and with it, the city's hope and its chaos. He was a man caught between fear and reluctant hope, knowing that the jester's laughter was both a balm and a spark that could ignite the tinderbox beneath their feet. As the day stretched on, Corbin moved among the people, offering jokes that cut through despair and moments of quiet empathy that touched hearts hardened by fear. Each smile he drew was a small victory, a crack in the armor of doom. But the factions were rising, and the city's fragile peace was a candle flickering against the storm. Somewhere between laughter and tears, hope and desperation, the lines were being drawn, and Corbin knew the next act would demand all his wit, courage, and heart. "Why fear the end?" he whispered to himself as twilight blurred into night, "when we can laugh our way through it." And yet, as the shadows lengthened, he wondered if laughter alone would be enough to hold back the darkness gathering at the city's edges. The stage was set, the players poised, and the cosmic joke was far from over. With a final bow to the night, Corbin prepared for the rising storm, his painted smile a beacon amid the gathering shadows, hope in the face of absurdity, laughter against the end. The city was watching, and so was fate. The labyrinth was less a place and more a state of being, a tangled web of corridors lined with shelves that seemed to stretch into infinity, each one heavy with scrolls, books and documents that whispered secrets of time and fate. Corbin followed Ezekiel down a narrow spiral staircase that groaned underfoot, the air growing cooler and thick with the scent of dust and ink. Around them, the walls flickered with strange lights, as if the very building breathed with a life of its own. "This," Ezekiel said, his voice low and reverent, is where the cosmic bureaucracy hides its entrails. The papers you see aren't mere documents, they are the threads of destiny, woven and unwoven by hands unseen. Corbin blinked, eyes wide behind the painted smile. The shelves were stacked with impossible things, ledgers that recorded moments yet to come, clocks that ticked backward, and filing cabinets that occasionally hummed and shifted their drawers on their own. Floating above one table was a globe spinning erratically, its surface a patchwork of colors that shimmered and changed like a soap bubble caught in sunlight. "And you believe this mess controls when the world ends?" Corbin asked, half joking, half serious. Ezekiel nodded, stroking his wild white beard. "It's absurd, isn't it? A bureaucracy so vast and complex that it must employ its own kind of madness to function. But madness with rules a cosmic joke with punchlines written in the stars." They moved deeper, past a wall where clocks ticked out of sync, some running fast, others slow, their faces melting like wax in the dim light. Suddenly, a faint shimmer rippled in the air ahead, like heat haze on a summer street. Through it, Corbin glimpsed shadowy figures, tall, silent, and shifting between forms like mist caught in a breeze. Their eyes gleamed with the relentless precision of ticking clocks, cold and unblinking. "Fate enforcers," Ezekiel whispered. "They're the ones who keep the schedule. If the apocalypse is to proceed, they're the ones who pull the levers." Corbin's heart thumped in his chest. The joke he had thrown at the universe was no longer just laughter, it was a challenge, a disruption of that cold, mechanical order. They retreated to a quieter corner, near a flickering street lamp that seemed oddly out of place in this vast archive. Ezekiel unfolded an ancient tome, its pages brittle but alive with strange symbols. "Hope, Corbin," he said, "is the absurd rebellion against inevitability. Even in this place where fate is catalogued and controlled, the human spirit still pulses with unpredictability." Corbin pulled out a scrap of charcoal and began sketching the fate enforcer's grotesque caricatures with clock faces and shadowy limbs, his lines playful yet sharp. Ezekiel chuckled, the sound echoing softly in the cavernous space. Laughter, Ezekiel mused, is the crack in the cosmic machinery. As they climbed back to the surface, the city spread before them like a living mosaic, streets buzzing with nervous energy, faces etched with hope and dread. Above, the sky remained a stubborn canvas of twilight, refusing to fold into the apocalypse that should have been. Perched on a rooftop, Corbin gazed out, the patchwork of lights below flickering like stars stolen from the heavens. The ticking of distant clocks seemed to merge with the city's heartbeat, a relentless rhythm demanding order, yet defied by the laughter echoing from the streets. He realized then that the machinery behind fate was vast and inscrutable, but not infallible. Somewhere in the absurdity, in the cosmic joke he had become part of, was a chance to outwit even the coldest of clocks. The city's survival depended not on the hands of time, but on the persistence of laughter and hope. And Corbin, the jester prophet, was ready to play his part. But as the shadows lengthened and the ticking grew louder, one question lingered in the air like a whispered challenge. Could humor truly bend the gears of fate? Or was it merely a fleeting distraction before the inevitable end? With that thought, Corbin folded his painted smile into a grin, the absurdity of it all shining bright in his eyes, ready to face whatever came next. The evening air hung thick with an unnatural stillness as the city's restless murmur faded into silence. On the cracked cobblestones of the central square, shadows lengthened and twisted, coalescing into a figure that seemed less flesh and bone than a living embodiment of time itself. The harbinger had returned. His presence was an affront to the senses, eyes like ticking clocks, each tick echoing a heartbeat of inevitability, and a form shrouded in shifting shadows that seemed to devour the pale streetlight. The crowd, gathered in tentative expectation, swallowed their breaths, the usual cacophony of whispers and restless shifting stilled by the weight of his arrival. Corbin, standing at the heart of the square, was an island of color and light amid the gathering gloom. His patchwork clothes caught the last glimmers of daylight, and his painted smile, bright, irreverent, unyielding, seemed almost a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Despite the chill crawling up his spine, Corbin's eyes held steady, locking onto the Harbinger with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. So, the Harbinger's voice rolled out, a mechanical murmur that seemed to vibrate with the grinding gears of some vast cosmic clockwork. The jester who mocks the end dares to defy the schedule. The apocalypse countdown, disrupted and delayed by your absurd antics, threatens the balance of all things. A murmur ran through the crowd, a collective shiver that was part fear, part awe. Corbin's mind raced, each word from the Harbinger a tolling bell, marking the gravity of the moment. Yet, beneath the dread, a spark of that familiar, ridiculous hope flickered. "Balance," Corbin replied, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "You speak of balance as if it's a ledger to be balanced, a chore to be completed. But what if the joke's on you? What if the balance is a cosmic punchline and we're all just waiting for the laugh?" The Harbinger's eyes narrowed, the ticking growing louder, as if the very air strained under the pressure of impending judgment. The countdown must be reset. The apocalypse must proceed as decreed. Your interference is a threat to the universe's order. Compliance is not a request. Before Corbin could respond, a shadow moved beside him, Luna, pragmatic as ever, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "We won't let you tear this city apart," she said, voice low but firm. "There's more at stake here than cosmic schedules and decrees." Ezekiel emerged as well, his wild hair catching the moonlight, eyes twinkling with a blend of madness and insight. "The joke is older than time itself," he murmured. "And later, Corbin, is the rebellion that keeps the gears from grinding us to dust." The Harbinger's form flickered, shadows twisting in agitation. "You misunderstand the nature of duty. I am bound by necessity, not malice. Yet even I am, troubled by the resilience you embody, but duty must be done." Corbin took a step forward, the crowd's tension palpable behind him. "Then let's see if duty can withstand a good joke." What followed was less a battle and more a surreal dance, a volley of words and wit, irony and laughter. Corbin's humor, absurd and incisive, chipped away at the Harbinger's cold formality, each jest a spark against the darkness. The Harbinger countered with chilling logic and relentless ticking, the cosmic machinery grinding towards inevitable conclusion. Luna's steady presence grounded Corbin, while Ezekiel's philosophical musings lent depth to the absurdity unfolding. The city seemed to hold its breath, caught between the ticking clock of fate and the rising crescendo of human defiance. Hours seemed to pass in moments, the square a stage for a cosmic irony that transcended understanding. In the end, it was neither force nor fury that swayed the day, but laughter, ridiculous, hopeful, and utterly human. The Harbinger paused, the ticking slowing, shadows retreating as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon. Perhaps, he conceded, voice less certain, the schedule might accommodate this anomaly. For now. Corbin's painted smile broadened, not with triumph, but with a bittersweet understanding. The fight was far from over, but a line had been drawn, a testament to the power of humor and hope against the cold machinery of fate. As the city stirred awake, caught once again in its endless limbo, Corbin knew the true battle was not against the apocalypse itself, but against the dread that it inspired. And in that battle, laughter was the sharpest weapon. But in the shadows beyond the waking city, the ticking continued steady, unyielding and waiting. The end, it seemed, had only been postponed once more. The night was thick with the scent of oil and dust, the underground labyrinth beneath the city humming with the faint, but incessant ticking of countless countdown devices. Corbin crouched behind a rusted metal crate, Luna's steady breathing beside him, a calm contrast to the storm of thoughts raging in his mind. They were perched just beyond the cracked glass panel of the clocksmith's secret workshop, a cavernous space cluttered with gears, levers, and blueprints that seemed almost alive in their complexity. Below, the clocksmith himself was a figure of obsession incarnate. His grease-stained overalls clung to a frame bent by years of toil. His eyes, sharp and restless, darted between the devices, and the shadowy figures gathered close. These were the Fate Enforcers, agents of cosmic order, draped in uniforms as dark and precise as the inevitability they represented. Their faces were obscured by shifting shadows, their movements eerily mechanical, as if each step was dictated by the ticking clocks that governed their every act. "So, the reset must be absolute," one murmured, voice low and gravelly, reverberating with the weight of universal consequence. "No more delays, no more jokes. The timeline must be restored." The clocksmith nodded, fingers tracing a complex schematic. "The devices will be synchronized tonight. The city will be forced to face the apocalypse as scheduled. No more limbo." Corbin's heart pounded. This was the conspiracy that had been whispered about in hushed tones, the secret threat lurking behind the city's fragile peace. And now, it was undeniable. "We have to warn the others," Luna whispered, her voice urgent but controlled. "If they proceed, the entire city will be caught in a cataclysm they can't escape." They slipped away from the workshop, the weight of their discovery pressing down like the ever-looming end of the world. Outside, the city was a restless sea of anxious faces and tentative hope, the streets alive with rumors and whispers. Some clung to Corbin as a beacon of laughter and rebellion. Others eyed him with suspicion or despair. In a narrow alley dimly lit by a flickering street lamp, Luna confronted a lone Fate Enforcer. Her gaze was fierce, her words sharp and unyielding. Why sabotage hope? Why force the end when the people are still fighting? The Enforcer's response was cold, mechanical. "Order must be maintained. The cosmos demands it." Defiance stirred in Luna's voice. "Then you'll have to deal with us." Back in the heart of the city square, Corbin climbed a makeshift stage as twilight bulled into night. The crowd gathered, a sea of faces etched with exhaustion and longing. As he spoke, his words wove the tale of the conspiracy, the betrayal by those sworn to maintain order, the peril threatening to unravel their precarious existence. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, the revelation igniting a fierce flame of awareness and resistance. Corbin's humor, once a simple jester's tool, had become a clarion call for unity and hope against the cold machinery of fate. Later, on a quiet rooftop overlooking the sprawling cityscape, Corbin and Luna sat beneath a canopy of indifferent stars. The distant ticking of the apocalyptic devices was a haunting lullaby, a reminder of the stakes they faced. "We've lit the spark," Corbin said softly. "Now we have to keep the fire alive." Luna nodded, her piercing gaze fixed on the horizon. "The city is fragile, but so are we. Together, maybe that's enough." As the night deepened, the city held its breath, teetering on the edge of chaos and hope. The conspiracy was unveiled, the players revealed, and the battle for the future had begun. In the face of cosmic inevitability, laughter and rebellion had found new courage, and the jester's role as prophet had never been more vital. The ticking clocks below promised an end, but Corbin knew better. The true countdown was to a new beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came next, armed with wit, resilience, and a joke that might just save them all. The city's fate hung in the balance, and as dawn approached, the question echoed louder than ever: could laughter truly defy the end of the world? The answer, Corbin believed, was a joke worth telling. The morning sun broke through the thick, grey clouds hanging stubbornly over the city, casting pale light on streets that had long forgotten the warmth of certainty. Corbin, wearing his patchwork clothes that seemed stitched from every color the world could offer, climbed atop the cracked fountain at the city's center. His painted smile was not merely decoration, it was a banner, a challenge, a beacon. The crowd that had gathered was a sea of wary faces, eyes shadowed by fear and hope intertwined. But as Corbin opened his mouth to speak, it was not dread that filled the air, it was laughter. "Good people of the city," Corbin began, his voice ringing clear yet playful, "we stand on the brink of an end that never quite arrives. The world's clock ticks, tocks, and then pauses, like a cosmic comedian who's forgotten the punchline. But I say, if the universe won't finish the joke, then we will!" A ripple of laughter danced through the crowd, tentative at first, then swelling into a chorus that chased away the heaviness. Corbin's words were absurd, yet they carried the sharp edge of truth. The city, fractured and fearful, needed this moment, this defiant embrace of absurdity, as much as it needed air. Nearby, Luna paced the narrow alleys, her sharp eyes scanning groups gathered in hushed councils. Her practical clothes were dust-streaked, and her expression bore the weight of a leader who had seen too many fragile hopes shattered. Yet even she could not deny the shift that Corbin's laughter sparked. She moved quickly, negotiating truces between factions who eyed each other with suspicion, reminding them that their true enemy was the countdown ticking unseen, not each other. "We hold together," she whispered to a cluster of wary faces, "or we fall apart before the end even comes." Back at the city hall, Mayor Griggs leaned against the window, watching the joyous chaos below. The cynical lines of his face softened just a little as Corbin's voice carried upward, challenging the inevitability of their fate. Griggs had spent countless sleepless nights balancing the city's fragile order, and though part of him wanted to suppress this dangerous hope, another part, one he rarely admitted even to himself, felt a flicker of admiration. Perhaps, he thought, this jester was the city's only true leader. As the day progressed, Corbin's rally grew into a carnival of laughter and absurdity. Banners of ridiculous slogans fluttered in the breeze. Musicians played tunes that made even the most sullen toe tap. Children danced with painted faces, their laughter a bright thread weaving through the city's grey tapestry. The oppressive weight of fate seemed to lift, replaced by a collective breath held and then released in joyous rebellion. Corbin seized this energy. He climbed back atop the fountain as evening crept in, the sky a canvas of bruised purples and angry reds. "Tonight," he declared, "we laugh at the end of the world, not because it isn't terrifying, but because it is. Because hope is the most ridiculous joke fate can't silence. And as long as we laugh, the end stays postponed." The crowd erupted once more, voices raised not in despair, but in a chorus of defiance. But beneath the celebration, shadows stirred. The forces that governed fate had not forgotten. The Harbinger and his enforcers watched from beyond the veil of reality, their ticking eyes narrowing at this rebellion of laughter. Corbin's resolve was a challenge, an unpredictable variable in their cosmic equation. Yet for the city, for this moment, laughter was a shield and a sword. The jester's resolve had transformed from mere jest into a clarion call, a rebellion woven from absurdity and hope. The end might loom, but tonight the city lived. And it laughed. As the stars blinked uncertainly overhead, Corbin's painted smile stretched wider, not because he was unafraid, but because he chose to be brave. For in a world that dangled perpetually on the brink, sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply to laugh. And so the city held its breath, the joke continuing, the laughter echoing, and the end delayed once more. But how long could it last? That question hung in the night air, unanswered, as Corbin's eyes sparkled with the promise of more jokes to come. The city was holding its breath, and Corbin could feel it, a palpable tension woven through the air like an electric current. Standing on the edge of a rooftop, his patchwork clothes ruffling lightly in the cool evening breeze, he gazed out over the labyrinth of streets and buildings below. The sky was a bruised canvas of purples and oranges, the sun dipping below the horizon as if reluctant to leave this endless day behind. The usual cacophony of the city was subdued, replaced instead by the low murmur of whispered conversations and the occasional sharp clatter of shutters being closed in hurried preparation. Somewhere far off, a clock chimed a hollow, distant sound that seemed to echo the heartbeat of a city caught between hope and despair. Corbin's painted smile felt heavier tonight, a mask that no longer quite fit the weight of the moment. He thought back to the first joke he'd cracked, the one that had inadvertently delayed the apocalypse. It had been a joke aimed at the cosmic machinery itself, a reckless jab at the inevitability of doom. And yet, here they were, still standing, the end postponed once more. It was absurd, ridiculous even, but also strangely beautiful. As the twilight deepened, a narrow alleyway below caught his eye. There Luna moved with purposeful strides, her short cropped dark hair catching the fading light. She was a stark contrast to the city's desperation, a pillar of pragmatic strength. Corbin admired her, not only for her fierce loyalty, but for the way she grounded his flights of fancy with sharp realism. Luna was already deep in preparation, rallying the city's fractured factions, coaxing them into a fragile alliance against the looming cosmic threat. In the underground chambers she called home, maps were spread across tables, illuminated by the flickering glow of oil lamps. Her voice was steady, a beacon of resolve as she directed her compatriots with practiced authority. The factions were a motley assortment, survivors clinging to hope, those who had surrendered to despair, and others desperate for the apocalypse to finally sweep away their endless limbo. Luna's challenge was monumental, to forge unity from this disparate crowd, to keep the peace in a city teetering on the edge of chaos. Meanwhile, in his cramped office, Mayor Griggs wrestled with his own fears and ambitions. The walls were lined with faded posters, relics of countless false alarms and postponed ends. His face was creased with exhaustion, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. The mayor balanced precariously between cynicism and the desperate hope that Corbin's influence might hold the city together. The political game was as tense as the city's streets, with Griggs' advisors pushing for control and containment, while the populace's restlessness grew. The mayor knew that the coming days could make or break his legacy or shatter the fragile order he'd struggled to maintain. Amidst this turmoil, Corbin and Luna found a brief moment of quiet respite in a narrow alley. The muffled hum of the city's restless pulse surrounded them, a living testament to the fragile life hanging in the balance. Corbin's usual irreverent wit softened, replaced by a rare vulnerability as he confessed his doubts about the role fate had thrust upon him. Luna's piercing gaze softened, revealing a flicker of hope beneath her skepticism. They exchanged no grand speeches, only an unspoken understanding that whatever awaited them, they would face it together. It was a moment charged with tension and camaraderie, the calm before the inevitable storm. As night deepened, the city braced itself. The streets, once filled with wary resignation, now hummed with a quiet determination. Corbin's laughter, once a mere distraction, had become a rallying cry. Luna's steadfast leadership had woven a fragile tapestry of unity, and Mayor Griggs, for all his doubts, was preparing to navigate the political tempest to come. The cosmic showdown loomed closer, a surreal battle where wit would clash with inevitability, and laughter might just be the spark that kept the world alive. In that twilight hour, beneath a sky heavy with unspoken promises, the city waited poised on the edge of absurdity and hope. The end was near, yet somehow not quite yet. And so, as the first stars began to prick the evening veil, Corbin whispered to the night, "Let's see if the universe is ready to laugh this one off." The city held its breath. The joke was far from over. The air was thick with a strange stillness as I entered the chamber beneath the city, a place no one dared speak of in daylight, where the very fabric of time seemed to pulse with mechanical precision. The walls were lined with shifting shadows that flickered and twisted like living clocks, their silent ticking resonating in the hollow space. At the center, emerging from the darkness like a specter born of inevitability, stood the Harbinger. His form was a shifting mass of shadows, eyes glowing like twin ticking clocks, cold and unyielding. The weight of cosmic order pressed down on me, but beneath my painted smile, I felt the familiar spark of irreverence kindle within. So I said, bowing with a flourish that probably looked more desperate than graceful, "We meet at last, the keeper of doom's schedule. Care for a joke before the end." The Harbinger's voice was a grinding echo, formal and unyielding. "This is no place for frivolity, Jester. The countdown must be reset to preserve cosmic balance. Your antics disrupt the natural order." I grinned wider, the painted smile smeared slightly by nerves but undeterred. But isn't life itself a cosmic joke? A slapstick routine where the punchline is always just out of reach. What followed was no ordinary confrontation, but a surreal duel of words and wit. The chamber became an arena where humor clashed with fate's cold machinery. I volleyed jokes laced with cosmic puns, absurd observations on destiny, and sly digs at the bureaucracy of apocalypse management. The harbinger countered with grim proclamations, quoting regulations etched in the stars, invoking the sacred schedules of destruction. Each retort echoed through the chamber, a twisted symphony of order versus chaos. Why did the universe cross the road? I quipped, to get to the other side of inevitability, but it tripped over your paperwork. The harbinger's shadows flickered, a momentary hesitation. Luna's piercing gaze and Ezekiel's twinkling eyes watched from the sidelines, their silent support grounding me amid the cosmic tempest. I could feel the tension coiling tighter, the stakes beyond any earthly reckoning. Drawing on everything I had learned, the absurdity of fate, the resilience of hope, the power of laughter, I began to unravel the cold logic binding the harbinger. I pointed out the contradictions, the cosmic loopholes, the humor hidden in the machinery of doom. If the apocalypse is scheduled like a train, what happens when the conductor starts laughing at the timetable? I asked, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. For a moment, the ticking slowed, the shadows stilled. The harbinger's form flickered, the unyielding mask cracking, just enough to reveal a flicker of something almost like amusement. Reluctantly, he nodded, conceding to the absurd truth that even cosmic order could be bent by a well-timed jest. Outside the chamber, the city held its breath as the countdown that had haunted them for so long finally ceased its relentless march. The apocalypse was postponed once again, not by power or force, but by laughter and hope. I stepped back, the weight of the jester prophet settling comfortably on my shoulders, knowing that the battle was won for now. Yet the game was far from over, and the cosmic dance of absurdity continued, ever unpredictable. And so, in the heart of limbo, beneath ticking shadows and whispered fate, I learned that sometimes the smallest joke can echo across the universe, defying the end with a grin. But what comes next? If laughter can delay the inevitable, how long can it hold the world in its fragile, hopeful grasp? The curtain has fallen on this act, but the play goes on, and I am ready to keep the audience laughing, no matter what the cosmic script says. The city breathed a weary sigh, as if it had been holding its breath for an eternity, and was just now daring to exhale. The great square, scarred by years of anticipation and disappointment, was alive again, not with celebration, but with a fragile pulse of something new. Corbin stood on the cracked fountain, his colorful patchwork clothes a splash of irreverent joy against the gray stone and tired faces gathered below. His painted smile caught the fading light of the sun, a beacon of absurdity and hope in a place where the end of the world had become an endless postponement. The crowd was a motley collection of souls, some skeptical, some desperate, others simply exhausted by the weight of waiting. Their eyes, shadowed by the collective dread of countless false endings, flickered now with something that resembled curiosity, or perhaps the tentative stirrings of hope. Corbin's voice, carried by the gentle evening breeze, wove through the square like a warm thread, stitching cracks in the city's weary heart. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice light but steady, we have survived yet another day, and with it, the great cosmic joke continues. It seems the universe itself has a sense of humor, and if we must be part of the punchline, then so be it! But let us not wait with bated breath for the end that never quite arrives. Instead, let us laugh, dance, and live as if the joke is on the doom that haunts us. A ripple of tentative laughter spread through the crowd, hesitant at first, but growing stronger, more genuine. It was a sound foreign and yet familiar, a reminder that even in the shadow of oblivion, life could still find a way to sparkle with meaning. Meanwhile, beneath the city's surface, in a dimly lit underground room cluttered with maps, plans, and the hum of distant machinery, Luna paced with restless energy. Her short-cropped dark hair glinted under the flickering light as she spoke, her voice low and urgent. Corbin's words give them hope, but hope can be a fragile thing. The factions are restless, some worship him as a savior, others see him as a distraction from the inevitable. We must hold the peace, or this city will tear itself apart before the end ever comes. Corbin sat across from her, rubbing his painted hands together with a mixture of nervousness and determination. Then we hold on to the laughter, Luna. If we can make them laugh, even for a moment, we give them a reason to stay. Her piercing gaze softened just a fraction. And if laughter isn't enough? He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with resolve. Then we make it more than laughter. We make it a rebellion. Elsewhere, in a cluttered room filled with stacks of tattered books and scattered papers, Ezekiel sat cross-legged, robes draped messily over his wild white hair. Candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows as he spoke aloud, more to himself than to the visitors who occasionally stopped to listen. The cosmos is a grand jest, you see. Fate, doom, and destiny all woven into a tapestry that mocks our attempts to find meaning. Yet within this absurdity lies the spark of hope. To laugh in the face of the end is to declare that life, no matter how fleeting, is worth every breath. Corbin listened, absorbing the philosopher's words like a balm to his weary soul. Ezekiel's insight deepened the jester's understanding of their plight. It was not simply about delaying the inevitable, but about embracing the absurd and finding meaning in the defiance itself. Meanwhile, in the city's ornate yet time-worn council chamber, Mayor Griggs sat heavily behind a polished desk, the weight of his office etched into every line of his worn face. His voice was grave as he addressed a small gathering of officials, the political fallout from the endless delay settling like a thick fog over their deliberations. "We find ourselves in uncharted territory," he admitted, fingers steepled thoughtfully. The citizens cling to Corbin's message, and while some see it as a beacon, others view it as a threat to order. We must navigate this delicate balance carefully, lest we lose control entirely. A murmur of agreement and dissent rippled through the room. The mayor's cynicism was tempered by a reluctant acceptance. The apocalypse's postponement was no longer a mere delay, but a new reality they had to confront. Back in the square, as twilight deepened into night, Corbin's laughter rang out, clear and unyielding. Around him, the city's inhabitants found themselves drawn together by an invisible thread spun from shared uncertainty and fragile hope. The limbo they inhabited was no longer just a waiting room for doom, but a stage for resilience, for rebellion, for the stubborn refusal to succumb to despair. "We do not know what tomorrow holds," Corbin called out, voice buoyant and warm. "But tonight we laugh. Tonight we live. And in that laughter, we find the strength to face whatever comes next." The crowd erupted, a chorus of voices rising in unison, a symphony of defiance and hope echoing through the streets. The city, suspended between end and beginning, found its heart beating anew. Yet beneath the laughter, the question lingered, a quiet, persistent whisper that brushed against every soul. How long could hope endure in a world forever poised on the brink? And as the stars blinked awake overhead, the answer remained unwritten, a cosmic joke still unfolding in the shadow of the end. The city pulsed with an odd rhythm these days, a beat neither frantic nor still, but a steady, absurd heartbeat that echoed the strange new order Corbin had helped forge. Standing on the central square's makeshift stage, Corbin's patchwork clothes caught the waning sunlight, casting a kaleidoscope of colors over the crowd before him. His painted smile, once a mere costume, had become a beacon, a symbol of something far greater than mere jest. "Ladies, gentlefolk, and cosmic eavesdroppers," Corbin began, voice ringing with practiced ease, "we are gathered here not to mourn the end, but to celebrate the never-ending wait. Because if the world insists on hanging in there, so shall we with laughter!" The crowd chuckled, a ripple growing into a wave of laughter that carried through the air, mingling with the distant hum of a city that refused to succumb to dread. Luna stood off to the side, arms crossed but eyes softened. Her sharp gaze swept the crowd, the divided factions, the hopeful, the fearful, and though her pragmatism urged caution, even she could not deny the power of Corbin's words. The city, this sprawling metropolis suspended in the limbo of its own apocalypse, was learning to live not despite the absurdity, but through it. Later, Corbin and Luna moved through the marketplace, the heart of the city's fragile life. Stalls brimmed with goods that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary in this perpetual pause. Vendors exchanged wary glances, city factions mingled in uneasy truces, and the scent of spiced bread mingled with the faint metallic tang of the ever-present countdown devices ticking somewhere beneath the streets. "You think they'll hold?" Corbin asked, voice low as they navigated the crowd. Luna's piercing gaze met his. "They have to, for now. But hope without action is a candle in the wind. We need more than jokes." Corbin smiled wryly. "Then I'll be the candle and the wind." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of laughter, a contagious, ringing sound that pulled them toward a small park. There Ezekiel sat cross-legged, surrounded by a gathering of children and adults alike. His wild white hair seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight, and his voice danced between cosmic absurdities and profound truths. Imagine Ezekiel was saying that the universe is a joke, an elaborate prank played by forces beyond our reckoning. But the punchline, we get to laugh too. That's the real rebellion, a child giggled. Corbin leaned forward, catching the twinkle in Ezekiel's eyes. "And here I thought I was the only one with a cosmic sense of humor." "You're not alone," Ezekiel replied, "but humor is only part of the story. It's hope, a ridiculous, stubborn hope that keeps the punchline alive." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the city, Mayor Griggs watched from his office window. His fingers tapped nervously on the worn wooden desk, eyes tracing the streets alive with cautious optimism. The weight of leadership pressed heavily upon him. Yet even the cynical mayor found himself caught in the tide of change Corbin had stirred. A new order, he muttered to himself, one built on absurdity and hope. The city was far from healed. Factions still whispered, fear still lingered at the edges, and the machinery of fate ticked relentlessly beneath their feet. But for the first time in what felt like forever, the people did not cower at the brink of the end. They laughed, they hoped, and in that laughter they found a fragile peace. Corbin returned to the stage that night, the stars above twinkling in cosmic irony. He raised his voice, a clarion call to all who would listen. "We don't know what tomorrow holds. Maybe the end will come, maybe it won't. But as long as we breathe, as long as we laugh, the story isn't finished, and neither are we." A cheer erupted, raw and full of life. Somewhere deep in the cosmic machinery, gears ground to a halt, if only for a moment. The city, wrapped in its new order of absurdity, held its breath and laughed. And in that laughter, hope blossomed bittersweet, unyielding, eternal. As the crowd dispersed, Luna approached Corbin. "You realize, don't you? This isn't just a role. You're the heartbeat of this city now." Corbin's eyes sparkled beneath the painted smile. "Then I guess I better keep the jokes coming." And so, the jester prophet stood firm, a colorful beacon in a city suspended between doom and hope, between absurdity and meaning. The end remained postponed, but a new beginning flickered, one born of laughter, rebellion, and the stubborn joy of being alive. The story was far from over, and Corbin intended to make sure of it. The future was uncertain, the cosmic joke ongoing, but in that uncertainty lay possibility. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough. The night deepened. Somewhere beyond the stars, the universe chuckled quietly, and the city laughed with it, a new order of absurdity rising from the ashes of fear. The city was quiet in a way that felt different from the usual hush before the storm. It wasn't silence born of fear this time, but of something softer, a tentative peace. From the highest rooftop overlooking the central square, I watched the sun bleed its last colors into the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple that seemed to set the entire city aflame in a gentle glow. Around me, The crowd gathered, faces illuminated by the fading light, shadows mingling with the warmth of hope that I never thought would find a foothold here. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all the days that had led to this moment. 20 days, each one a step along a road paved with absurdity and laughter, dread and defiance. The apocalypse had been postponed again indefinitely, it seemed, and somewhere deep inside, I realized that this was no longer just a delay. It was a new beginning wrapped in a cosmic joke only we were privy to. "Friends," I began, my voice carrying across the square, "we have become the punchline in the universe's grandest joke. But perhaps, just perhaps, the joke is on the apocalypse itself." The crowd stirred, some chuckling, others exchanging glances filled with cautious optimism. For every time the end has been promised and denied, we have laughed back. For every shadow that loomed, we have sparked a light. And in that laughter, in that stubborn hope, we find our rebellion. Luna stood off to the side, her piercing gaze sweeping over the crowd. She was the anchor to my drifting thoughts, the pragmatist to my dreamer. When our eyes met, she gave a small nod, the first sign of encouragement I'd seen from her in days. It was enough. Hope was not blind. It was wary, calculating, but alive. After the crowd dispersed, Luna and I wandered the dimming streets, the distant murmur of conversations weaving through the cool evening air. "You really believe this can last?" she asked, voice low, tinged with skepticism but also something softer, faith perhaps. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I believe we can keep laughing, and as long as we do, the end stays just out of reach." She sighed, her breath visible in the cooling air. "Then we'll keep the city safe, keep the peace fragile but intact." Together. Our footsteps echoed softly, the city's heartbeat steady beneath our resolve. Meanwhile, underground in a small chamber lit by flickering flames, Ezekiel spun tales of cosmic absurdity to a small gathering. His wild white hair caught the firelight as his eyes twinkled with mischief and wisdom. "The universe," he said, "is the greatest comedian, and we are its favorite audience. Every delay, every twist, is a setup for the next laugh." Laughter bubbled up among the group, fragile but fierce, like sparks in the dark. His words wrapped around us, a balm and a challenge. At the far edge of the city, shrouded in shadows that seemed to ripple and shift, the harbinger stood silent. His eyes, like ticking clocks, observed the scene with a mixture of cold calculation and something almost like reluctant respect. The machinery of fate had been thwarted, not destroyed, but delayed, and perhaps forever changed. The cosmic order had met its match in the resilience of human spirit and the irrepressible power of laughter. He turned away slowly, his form dissolving into the night, a promise and a warning lingering in his absence. Back in the heart of the city, as darkness settled and stars blinked awake, I sat alone on the rooftop. The painted smile on my face was no longer a mask but a statement. In this endless limbo, I had found purpose not as a herald of doom, but as a bearer of absurd joy. A jester prophet whose weapon was laughter and whose armor was hope. The world might still end someday, or it might not. But until that day we would laugh, we would live, and in that laughter we would find our defiance. The night wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying with it the sound of distant laughter, a sound that would not be silenced. And so the city waited, poised on the edge of forever, cradled by the cosmic humor that bound us all. The end could come tomorrow, or the day after, or never at all. But as long as we held on to the ridiculous, the hopeful, the absurd, we were alive. More than alive, we were free. And that, I thought, was the greatest joke of all. What do you get when you cross the end of the world with a jester? I had asked once, long ago, on a street corner where the shadows seemed thicker than usual. "I don't know," a child had whispered, eyes wide. A punchline that never lands. But perhaps, I thought now, the punchline was exactly where we needed to be. Because in laughter, we find our strength, in absurdity, our meaning, and in hope, the stubborn refusal to let the world end quietly. The city breathed around me, alive and enduring, a testament to the cosmic joke that was our life. and as the stars winked knowingly overhead, I smiled, not just painted on my face, but deep within my soul. The end was never coming today, and that was worth celebrating.